Good morning. While folks are getting started, you guys can see a survey listed on your screen. It would be great if you guys could fill this out, and just from a scale to 1 to 5. How effectively do you leverage engineering metrics to drive your business decisions? And as we do that, again, welcome and thank you for joining Metrics That Matter. We're trying to use metrics to accelerate the value delivery and improve ROI. This is a joint webinar between Crosslake and Plandek. And I'll just do a quick introduction and hand it over to Will for introduction, and then we can kind of get into it. So I'm Kim Walters. I'm one of the senior managing directors at Crosslake. I've been here for 8 years within this company. Prior to that, I was at 15 years with Microsoft. So definitely been around the engineering block. And one of the things I've always took from my career is, no matter what position I've been in with, is to establish metrics for the organization, and then to promote a constant culture of continuous innovation and continuous improvement. And with that, I'll hand off to Will for an introduction.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kim. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Will. I'm our COO at Plandek. My role principally at Plandek is working very closely with our clients from the leadership level all the way down to the team level, really understanding how to make sense of data, where you can get value out of using metrics to help drive better decision-making, better efficiency, and ultimately better ROI off of your engineering team. So prior to that, I worked at Lytle for many years, leading into large-scale digital transformation programs. So definitely bring more of the kind of client delivery side mentality to the role and the work that we do with our clients here in Plandek.
Great, thanks. And then just looking at the poll results here, so it looks like you guys are in good hands. So we have a pretty good spread here, but most folks don't feel that out of 5, they're really leveraging metrics to actually make business decisions. And I think that's the point kind of our, I'm going to stop sharing the slide here. The kind of point of our discussion here is what we really want to do is kind of at least teach you guys or introduce you guys in the way we think about metrics and how we think about it to drive our business decisions. One of the things that I've realized the last kind of 8 years doing that is, I came from a, VP of engineering, CTO background. And as a CTO, I always thought, understanding that, Agile and cloud don't happen overnight. Those efforts don't pan out overnight. Business decisions are creating kind of cost issues that we see. And then a lot of times, we make a lot of great strides in the engineering perspective, but those don't always resonate with the, the leadership team or with the board. And then, of course, kind of offshore decisions come with their own hidden costs. And on the flip side, investors, board members, sometimes even a CEO, a CFO doesn't understand, why are we spending so much in technology? Are we making any progress? How should they think about ROI and technology investments? What does done look like on initiatives when I'm, proposing a modernization effort, for example, or proposing reduction of tech debt? And sometimes the board levels or investors don't understand many of these terms. So really what that creates is a very much a disconnect between kind of the engineers, the CTOs, VPs like yourself of engineering that run kind of the engineering effectiveness of the business and understand kind of technology and the KPIs at that level, and the board, right? And the way they're looking at the board. So sometimes what happens is that, we make some technology decisions on a very tactical level, and we fail to either communicate them or understand how we make those apparent to the leadership, to the board level. And many times we don't really have a mechanism for kind of connecting those dots. So a lot of kind of what we're going to talk about today is really about understanding kind of the business decisions and the impact of those business decisions and what you're trying to accomplish for a true north of metrics, and then take those and trace those back to the engineering metrics that you can actually implement with a tool like Plandek to actually make sure those are realized and communicated in a way that's effective for all different types of audiences. So that's kind of the little hearsay about what we're going to do today. And I guess, I'd like to start off with kind of asking Will maybe a softball question here is, You've been in this business for a while, kind of helping clients. How well do you usually see companies typically track and improve the effectiveness of tech metrics? How do they actually start, talking about the ROI story? What do you see and how do you advise clients from that level?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of customers that we work with, and naturally, I think a lot are generally in the early days, early stages, but a lot of the companies that we work with still provide a lot of emphasis on project level reporting, right? RAG statuses, where are we with this project, this allocation, this product, and so on and so forth. And largely it's because it's sort of deliverable outcome focused, which is very familiar to the majority of the stakeholders. But what that drives across a lot of customers that we work with is a very siloed mentality and a lack of understanding when we look across our engineering capability, how healthy is it? How effective is it? So we know if we're going to continue to invest in the engineering teams, we want to be able to ensure that it's not just about a project being delivered, but we've got the fundamentals behind that team that allows them not only to operate effectively, but also to think effectively. And so Plandek in some ways is about helping our clients understand what does the data actually look like? How effective are we at doing these certain things? But it's really about trying to drive the cultural shift and the mentality shift throughout the organization all the way down so that people are quite self-reflective and understanding of where they can get better, how they deliver more value. And so, Plandek, I think in some ways is complementary to these more project level status reports in the sense that it gives you comfort and understanding of actually doesn't matter what project we throw at the teams, fundamentally we are effective and we're continuing to drive more effectiveness in how we deliver software as a culture, as a community of engineers, not just a bespoke team that went off and delivered a particular project.
That's great. And then, I know we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the more kind of workshoppy things that Crosslake offers to augment some of the understanding what is important to a business and what metrics do we need to actually, tailor or actually capture. But from the Plandek perspective, how does someone start? Like when you start an engagement, what do you do? And especially for someone that's like ranked themselves like a 1 or 2 on this latest poll, how do you even begin that conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think a lot of companies that are moving into this space, the first instinct that they have is to look towards maybe some of the framework or the established set of metrics in the market, whether it's DORA or the flow metrics, so on and so forth. And I think the challenge that we see our clients have with those frameworks is that you're trying to fit your organization into a methodology that someone else has created in a rather bland way. And so the conversations that we have a lot with our clients really starts on the fundamentals of defining what we consider to be sort of North Star metrics. And really, it's a very simple model where, as a leadership team, it's really important for you to be able to evidence what are the objectives you're trying to achieve as an engineering organization, right? Whether it's more DevOps inspired, more value delivery inspired, more efficiency inspired. There's a lot of common threads across them, but every culture, every client is quite unique. And therefore, being able to establish those objectives and then underpin them with a set of metrics that really help an organization track and understand where they are in achieving those objectives is fundamental. And I'm sure you have a lot of those similar conversations with your clients as you're walking through, just trying to get them to distill a set of objectives that not only help them, with a framework of metrics to measure, but one of the real values that we see across our organizations as well is it gives engineering teams, engineering managers as an organization as a whole, in addition to the stakeholders, a set of consistent metrics so that everyone is pulling in the same direction, and you can create this environment where you have really called scalable conversations and scalable learnings, because you have every member in your organization really focused on the same patterns that you're trying to drive in terms of your software improvements, software delivery improvements.
Great. And I'm gonna key into a word you said. You talked about North Star metrics. And then there's strategic alignment metrics. What is the difference between the two, and how does that resonate within Plandek?
It's a good question. So I think, there are kind of 3 questions which we try to drive clients to think about when answering, right? One is, are you working in an efficient way? And what does that mean? How do you translate that? Right? And there are a set of metrics, for instance, lead time to value shows you how long it takes for you to deliver idea to a customer. So you can really evaluate how long that feedback loop takes, but also more importantly, how efficiently you're working throughout that process. Are you focused on the right priorities? And are you focused on value generating work? these are much more strategically aligned, right? In the sense of how is our engineering focus distributed between value generating work, and is that aligned with our strategic objectives? Are we focused on the right priorities? So, we have a product strategy that we want to roll out over the next year that's aligned with a tight business plan. How is the effort that we're actually seeing across our engineering team? How does that align with those priorities that we've set in our business that are evidenced in them? So we think of the North Star metrics as really a way in which you want to drive certain patterns of behavior and improvement within your software delivery process, whereas strategic alignment is really understanding how is my R&D function aligning to enabling the creation of value for our business, whether it's specifically around value streams or whether it's really about understanding differentiation between how much time are we spending, how much resource are we investing, how much money is being invested into value generating work versus things like you were talking about before when it comes to technical debt, bug backlogs, which are absolutely critical, but to an extent that they exist too much, then start to cannibalize your own capacity in terms of being able to generate new value for your business, launch a new product, launch into a new market, be able to react to market changes by whatever your competitors are doing at the particular moment. So that kind of how we differentiate those two.
Okay, great. And then how have you guys dealt with folks that have several delivery organizations or maybe several Scrum teams? How have you been able to kind of allow people to cascade metrics and seeing across that and kind of evaluate those?
It's a very good question. So we were working with a client actually yesterday who's got a very similar challenge to that, right? So 7 main sort of product areas that they're working on. Some are in legacy applications, some are cloud native modern application builds, completely different worlds from an actual software engineering, from an architectural perspective, but as well from a process perspective in of itself and the constraints you figured. How we advise a lot of clients is that, in some environments, a set of North Star metrics across your organization might be absolutely suitable if you have enough common patterns across the architecture and the ways that you work. Where you have more differentiation between the two, actually having a set of North Star metrics or those key metrics at a product level is really important. And then that way, at each product level, people understand within that product function, all the way from the head of product all the way down to the individual Scrum teams, what are the key North Star metrics that they should be focusing on in terms of moving that product forward.
Okay, great. And then I know you've worked on something called intelligent analytics. Can you tell a little bit about that and how that kind of plays into the perspective, understanding the team?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things, Plandek is fantastic as a tool at helping organizations reflect back and understand, how have we been doing? Where are we effective? Where are we ineffective? Where are we spending money where we don't think we should be spending money, and so on. But obviously, in order to drive any value in any software delivery organization, the first and foremost important thing is the adoption of the teams. And teams are busy, and they're incredibly pragmatic in how they want to spend their time. So Plandek over the last year has invested a lot in terms of building out what we call our intelligent insight capability, right? Our live view feature is what it's called. And what it really allows you to do is analyze how a team is currently working compared to their historical data in a way that allows us to flag potential risks in the delivery process that teams can action immediately. So in the context of a sprint, I don't want to know day 9 or day 10 that I have a problem. If you can help evidence that early in the process, I can do something about it, be more successful in that sprint. And that's a kind of building block to success for Scrum teams as you aggregate them across an organization and over time. So the intelligent analytics is really about 2 things. One is using more advanced analysis, being able to uncover some of the robust value that we can get out of the data so teams can spot what risks they might have immediately in front of them so that they can resolve them and move on. But also it really comes down to really getting the buy-in and adoption from those teams, because if something is tactically very useful, teams will adopt it. That will change the behavior, and then you'll start to see the North Star metrics move over time in a very significant way. If everything is left as retrospective, it's fine, but you do naturally then have a gap between, executing, reviewing the data, trying to implement changes. It's nothing tactically fixing, nothing helping you put out the fire that you have today. It's more reflective by nature.
That's great. So that's more of a proactive culture than a reactive culture. So in the same way, what are the key success metrics for having this kind of data-led culture? How do you kind of infuse that into an organization?
It's a great question. And I think it all starts really from Well, when I look across all of our clients and kind of see some that have been more successful than others, I think some of the key factors to consider is, number one is leadership, right? As a leadership team, you should be able to set out your objectives. You should be able to select a set of North Star metrics that drive an organization towards those objectives and should be able to then cascade that. It's really absolutely fundamental because teams will be looking to leaders to help set expectations and understanding where should we be focused. It doesn't have to be the end of the journey. It can absolutely be the start. And for most of the clients, we really actively promote the fact that this is just the start of a journey, but it's an important start because you're setting the sort of parameters and where you want the organization to focus and what you want them to value when it comes to data. The other thing I think is really important is how you interact with teams when it comes to data, right? So really, whether your company itself has a troubled history with data or people have come from other environments, a lot of teams react in a very cynical and very cautious way when it comes to data being introduced into the environment. They assume naturally that, oh, this is here, somebody is measuring me, they're going to use it as a stick and so on and so forth. So it's really important to create safe spaces within the organization, to find ways in which you can promote success, but also promote failures so that people feel comfortable with the fact that, the last month has not been particularly flattering for us, but I'm not going to have to worry about the data having really negative impacts on me personally. Actually, the organization is going to be supportive because it's all about learning from our failures, applying that moving forward, because that kind of a feedback loop is absolutely instrumental to doing it. And then the last thing I'd say is governance, right? Keeping the conversation going with metrics is really important, but it's not just a sort of planned governance. It's also what one of our clients previously referred to as tactical conversations, as in a CTO would just drop by and say, how are things going? What are you learning from the data? What are you learning? And his ability to repeat that tactical conversation, that tactical drop-in, he found was incredibly powerful in the way that which his managers start to think in the proximity that they had to their data. So those are kind of three takeaways I would definitely think about: is setting the expectation, creating safe spaces, and really not underestimating the value of tactical conversations with your teams, with your engineering managers, and so on and so forth.
Right. Great answer. Great answer. And then in your journey in doing this, I'm sure you've helped out a lot of teams. What were some of the metrics and sort of the benefits that companies can expect? So perhaps there's a story you can tell about where a company was and after Plandek provided their insight and their tool, like what are some of the benefits that they got?
Yes. So I think soft benefits wise, one of the things that engineering leaders, a lot of our customers really prioritize is people growth, organizational growth, maturity growth, and the cultural growth. So hard to put a number on some of those things. There's obviously ENPS scores, but realistically speaking, what we have seen without a shadow of doubt with our customers is that higher performing teams are more effective teams with lower churn rates of employees, and it sustains over a period of time. So that is one of the big benefits. And I think one of the ones that's often underestimated is the fact that, teams at the start, there's a journey to adopting data, but once they become very effective, they actually appreciate the fact that actually we're working much better as a team, and that has only improvements. From a pure metrics side, I'm thinking one of our clients we spoke with recently had, they've been with us for a couple of years now, and about 7 months ago, they made some significant changes in the organization, both in terms of some of the people that they had in the organization, as well as technology where they were going to invest. And a lot of this was led by some of the issues that they were seeing, what was holding them back, being able to deliver value to market much more effectively, being able to adopt more of a DevOps culture. So those changes aside, about 7 months ago, in the last 3 months, we've been going through with their CTO recently, and there's been some absolutely incredible. So they've doubled the amount of deployments that they're now making to clients. And when I say double, it's over 2,000 over the last couple of months. So significantly improved the amount. That has enabled them to increase their throughput for about 20%. So however you measure that in terms of cost avoidance or whatever, a significant impact of 20% on the throughput of what that team is working on is quite significant for them. But it's also allowed them to collapse feedback loops by 25%. So when customers want new features, it now takes them 25% less time to actually get those new features into clients' hand, and also to launch new products, which again, either from an NPS and satisfaction perspective or from launching new features that are revenue generating, there's a strong business case behind each one of those things.
Great. All right. And then one of the things that we've done at Crosslake is, again, to figure out how we bridge the chasm between what board members and directors and folks at the CFO and CEO level think, and then some of the VP of engineering, is create what we call a QOT framework, a quality of technology framework. And it's very kind of a pun on words, but it's simply kind of a way that people measure QOE now, quality of earnings, and equate that to quality of technology. And I'll flash it up on the screen, but I think, and I know that Will's looked at this as well as some of the other folks at Plandek. One of the things that is interesting about this is that it allows us to have some of these Uber conversations and understand, like you said, the strategic direction, the North Star of folks, and understand what are those areas they really want to improve and measure from a business perspective. And then once we have these workshops, then we can get down and look at the individual metrics that we want to capture. And it's a great starting point for us to, at Crosslake, to start the conversation and then kind of hand on over to kind of Will and his team for implementation. And I know we've done it with a few clients as well, but can you kind of pick up and talk about how, we've done this in a few areas for a few customers, and then once you've gotten this business impact framework to figure out how we kind of go and get that implemented and how quickly you can do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, from a lot of these metrics, Plandek is a fairly lightweight tool from a SaaS perspective. I mean, without boring folks, you can literally go in and sign up and set up and start ingesting data almost straight away. So it's a very simple way to set it up. I think what you're referring to under the QOT is really essential, right? Setting up of a product is fairly straightforward. Ingesting the data is fairly straightforward. Being able to configure metrics around some of these is also quite straightforward as well for a lot of our clients. So when you take some of the QOT metrics really emphasized on things like your DevOps processes, your time to value, how effectively you can deliver value, how that focus is distributed across different value streams and across value delivering work versus non-value delivering work, it's very, 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 very straightforward. I guess is there anyone in particular that you wanted me to?
No, well, maybe where have you seen who tends to sponsor these metrics, or where have you seen the most emphasis? Is it kind of in building and efficiency, or where do you see kind of the most where people start most likely, and then where are the most impactful ones?
Yeah, I think where people start is often driven more from a cultural perspective, I would say. So I think there are some important metrics which you want to look into from a potentially a board level, right? How do we deliver value, right? How effectively can our software delivery processes support iterative deployment of value to our customers so that we can collapse feedback loops and so we can continue to deliver product in an effective way? Those are very, very important fundamental conversations, not only to the CTO, but more importantly to the CFO and the board itself, that want to understand from a product perspective, are we building a capability? That investment that we're putting into technology, does it enable us to actually be responsive to client preferences as well as changing market conditions, right? So I think those are the ones that I would suggest that probably at the board level. But from an initial setup, I think one thing that engineering leaders need to consider is if the second part of this is also about taking your people on a journey, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to be very focused. And this is where the North Star metrics, I think, become particularly important to an organization, because what they allow you to do is really focus your teams on a particular set of metrics, which are going to drive the objectives that you've aimed you've set up for your organization. So we want to be able to deliver value more effectively, lead time to change, or lead time to value and cycle time, right? We want to be able to have more of a predictable, reliable Scrum delivery, right? So making sure that all of your sprint targets are met as effectively as possible, right? Can we deploy value as quickly and iteratively as possible to our clients, right? The DORA metrics have picked up a lot of speed on this. We use them a lot internally at Plandek. The two that we really focus on a lot are lead time to value, lead time to change and deployment frequency, which just give you a good barometer and understanding of, backlog aside, process aside, do we actually have the mechanical ability to be able to deliver value in very, very, very quick iterative chunks to our users so that we can get feedback from them, test and learn, and constantly evolve a product. When you look at all of the great products in the market today, the one thing they all have in common is the ability to deliver value very, very quickly, very effectively, get customer feedback, and iterate on top of that. So those are the ones I think would fit that profile.
Okay, great. I think my moderator told me we have about 3 minutes left. So Carl, I don't know if there's any questions from the audience that you want to kind of throw out.
Yeah, we have a few questions here. And if anybody has any questions, please enter them into the chat at the bottom or on the Q&A panel, and we'll ask as many as we can in the time allotted. So the first one that we have got is, when you're measuring these metrics and with this, how do you prevent a top-down approach from developing within the culture, kind of like a big brother is always watching you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And one of the things that we really try to promote as actively as possible is when you're bringing data into an organization that may not necessarily be used to using data in a lot of ways, focus less on the number and focus more on the conversation. How is this metric driving a conversation that is meaningful to your business? And that sounds a bit woolly and sounds a bit soft, and I'm not suggesting you do this for 10 years. But if you start to build the conversation focus rather than the number focus over the first 2 or 3 months, it makes a material difference in the way that teams perceive data. The other important thing, which is just quite straightforward, if a team is not doing well, don't beat them over the head with it. Use that data as a way of helping them understand how can we self-diagnose, because that ultimately at the end of the day, yes, you want the nice number, but actually what you really want is a team that can self-diagnose, because they're going to fix that number and a number is going to drop. And it's a bit more like whack-a-mole. So what you're really trying to build is a sustainable, self-reflective culture and a very smart culture, which is able to understand and interpret data. So supporting that on their journey, I think, is really, really, really important and often underrated in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I agree with Will's comments there. And it's really about continuous improvement. And it's about making sure that you're constantly moving more towards a goal. But that goalpost is always going to be moving because there's always going to be different dynamics and different business outcomes that you want to achieve. So it's really about improving those metrics as we see versus a finite number.
Perfect. And, with all this data coming in, do either of you have any best practices for managing the data hygiene or data cleanup of the system for the metrics?
We always hear this question. Every customer, I mean, for anyone, so almost every client we've ever had has asked this question, and almost every client has data that isn't in the best shape. I think what often happens is people feel like, oh, our data is not in a good shape, so therefore we can't do anything about it. It kind of paralyzes progress, right? I couldn't recommend actually quite the opposite, which is to use a tool that helps you actually visualize where the data hygiene is and exactly what's holding you back. So if you want to see how long it takes for you to deliver value or what part of the process you're efficient at, and if you don't see the data there or its hygiene, it actually creates a great forcing function for teams to focus on, all right, we need to fix that thing. So I would definitely not worry too much about, is our data in a good enough position? Because I don't think anybody's data, even clients that have been working with data for years, data is always going to have its own issues because people interact with data, and therefore naturally there's going to be human error that's incurred with it. But use data as a way of being able to self-correct and really understand how you can get more value out of various different metrics or perspectives that you're looking at. So use tools like a Plandek or whatever it might be to actually provoke the conversation rather than being worried about not being able to get enough value, because you will definitely get enough value, even just out of the hygiene side, let alone the actual insight that follows on that.
And I'll just add to that. I think in this context, less is more. Always start with a few small KPIs or metrics that you want to actually evaluate and get those really clean. And then as you get better and better and your data gets more cleanly and your processes get more robust, then add additional kind of metrics and KPIs, but start small.
Perfect. Well, we are right at time. So I just want to thank both Will and Kim for their time today, talking to us about metrics that matter. A couple quick things. If anybody else has any questions or would like a consultation from either Plandek or Crosslake, you can email us at marketing@crosslaketech.com, or you can visit the contact page for either of our websites. And then right after this, you'll have a little quick after webinar survey pop up. If you would mind filling that out, that would be great. And that will help us plan for future topics for the webinar. But again, Will, Kim, thank you today. And I hope everybody else has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.